The sun was just beginning to stretch its pale fingers across the horizon, casting a faint orange glow over the vast farmlands of the Midwest. Fields of corn and wheat swayed gently in the morning breeze, seemingly untouched by the chaos that had swallowed most of the country. Here, in this forgotten stretch of America, life still clung to the old rhythms: planting, tending, harvesting. But beneath the calm, a quiet tension thrummed, a heartbeat that grew louder with each passing day. In the small farming town of New Liberty, the residents were well aware of the world beyond their fences. "Dead America," a phrase once whispered in news reports, then shouted in warnings, had come to define the sprawling ruins beyond their fields. Cities had fallen to the relentless march of the undead, and survivors had been forced to flee, scatter, or perish. But New Liberty remained, stubbornly, a bastion of relative safety. This was thanks in large part to the unlikely guardians of this last safe zone: farmers, men and women who had once only known hoe and plow, but who now bore rifles and makeshift weapons with quiet determination. They were no soldiers, no mercenaries, just ordinary people pushed to extraordinary lengths. One of those was Thomas Gray, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, whose weather-beaten face told a story of years spent under the open sky. He had never held a gun before the outbreak, but now his hands gripped the stock of a rifle as if it were an extension of himself. His family's farm was nestled just outside New Liberty, and every morning he walked the perimeter fences, eyes sharp for any sign of the creeping menace that lurked in the shadows beyond. Today, something felt different. As Thomas stood at the edge of his cornfield, the usual silence was broken by a distant, chilling sound, a low, guttural moan that didn't belong to any animal or natural cause. He froze, every muscle tensed. The moan grew louder, closer. His heart pounded as he scanned the horizon, and there they were, figures, staggering and relentless, shambling toward the town's edge. Zombies. The word felt heavy on Thomas's tongue, even after all this time. They had no names, no identities, just a terrifying hunger. These creatures were not just threats, they were the embodiment of a nightmare that refused to die. Without hesitation, Thomas turned and sprinted toward the town, shouting a warning. Doors slammed open as neighbors emerged, clutching whatever weapons they had: shotguns, pitchforks, even heavy farm tools. The town was waking up to fight. Among the gathered was Sarah Ellis, a sharp-eyed woman who ran the local feed store. She was known for her fierce spirit and quick thinking. As Thomas reached her, he saw the hard set of her jaw and the way she swiftly organized the others. "We don't have time to waste," she said, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "Get the barricades up. The fence won't hold if they get close." The farmers-turned-fighters scrambled to action, moving with surprising speed and efficiency. Years of labor had made them strong and resourceful. Now, those skills were put to the test in a way none had imagined. But the zombies kept coming, their groans growing into a cacophony that echoed across the fields. From his vantage point on the roof of the town's old grain silo, Caleb Morgan watched the approaching horde. Caleb was a young man, barely out of his teens, with a reputation for being a bit reckless but fiercely loyal. He clutched a shotgun, eyes narrowed as he took careful aim. One by one, he fired, each shot ringing out with a sharp crack that cut through the morning air. He didn't enjoy this, no one did, but survival demanded it. Behind him, the town's makeshift defense was holding for now, but Caleb knew it was only a matter of time before the undead reached the fence. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the south side of town. The fence was breaking. Panic surged through the defenders. Men and women who had never fired a gun before scrambled to reinforce the breach, throwing whatever heavy objects they could find at the advancing monsters. Thomas was among them, his rifle steady despite the chaos. He felt a jolt of fear but pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "We can't let them in," he shouted. "Hold your ground." The battle for New Liberty had begun. Hours later, the sun was high overhead, and the survivors had pushed back the initial wave. The dead lay strewn around the perimeter, some riddled with bullets, others dispatched with desperate blows from axes and shovels. Breathing hard, Thomas wiped sweat from his brow and looked around. The town was battered but still standing. For now. But this was only the beginning. The zombie threat was relentless and growing. Supplies were running low, and the town's defenses needed strengthening. More than that, the people of New Liberty needed to prepare, not just to survive, but to fight back. As the survivors gathered in the town hall, Sarah took charge. "We can't stay here waiting to be overrun," she said. "We need to find out where they're coming from, why they're moving this way, and how to stop them." A murmur ran through the crowd. These were farmers, not soldiers. No one had answers, but everyone knew one thing: if they didn't stand together, they would fall alone. Caleb stepped forward, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "I say we send a group out to scout. Find the source of this horde." Thomas nodded. "I'm with you." Others followed. What had begun as simple farmers was now a group of fighters. They had no choice. This was their home, their last refuge, and they were ready to defend it, no matter the cost. As the group prepared to leave the safety of the town, a cold wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the distant moan of the undead. New Liberty was no longer just a farm town. It was the last stand of humanity in dead America. And the fight was just beginning. Would you like me to continue with part 2? The group gathered in the town hall was a mix of faces worn by hard work, worry, and determination. Thomas Gray, Sarah Ellis, and Caleb Morgan stood at the front, ready to lead what was perhaps the most dangerous mission any of them had ever faced. Their plan was simple in words but perilous in reality: venture beyond the relative safety of New Liberty's walls to scout the undead horde's origin and find a way to stop the relentless threat before it overwhelmed them all. Sarah looked around the room. "We won't know how to fight them if we don't understand where they're coming from. We have to learn more. But no one goes alone." Her eyes met Thomas's and Caleb's. "We need a small, quick team. People who can handle whatever we find out there." Several hands shot up, though the fear in their eyes was undeniable. This was not a usual day on the farm, this was war. Caleb stepped forward. "I know the back roads and forests better than anyone. I'll guide the team. We'll move fast and keep low. No unnecessary risks." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. "I'm in. I'll cover the rear." Sarah chose 2 others, Maggie, a sharp-shooting schoolteacher who had adapted quickly to this new world, and Jack, a burly mechanic who could fix anything and wield a wrench like a weapon. With the 5 of them assembled, they began gathering supplies: rifles, ammo, makeshift armor from leather and metal scraps, first aid kits, and whatever food they could carry. As the team prepared to leave, the rest of the town watched silently. The fear of losing more people was thick in the air, but so was a fierce pride in their defenders. These farmers, once ordinary, were becoming something more. Before stepping out the door, Thomas looked back at the town's rusty water tower, a symbol of their stubborn survival. "We bring back answers," he said firmly, "or we bring back a plan. But we bring back hope." The morning sun was higher now as the 5 slipped through the gate, leaving behind the makeshift barricades and the walls they had built. The farmland quickly gave way to wild overgrowth, the once tamed landscape now reclaimed by nature and death. The air was heavy with silence, except for the occasional crunch of dry leaves underfoot. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound might be the moan of the undead. Caleb led the way, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knew these woods like the back of his hand. He pointed out places to avoid, old roadblocks, abandoned vehicles, and warned the group to stay alert. Hours passed, the sun climbing relentlessly as they pushed deeper into the unknown. They found evidence of recent undead activity: broken fences, shredded crops, and in one chilling spot, the remains of a deer, half devoured and left to rot. The group exchanged uneasy glances. The horde was not just moving, it was growing stronger, spreading. As afternoon fell, they reached the outskirts of a ruined town. Buildings stood as empty shells, windows shattered, doors hanging loose. The scent of decay was thick, and an unnatural stillness hung over the streets. They moved cautiously, every step measured. From a cracked window, Sarah spotted movement. "Zombies," she whispered. "At least a dozen." Thomas tightened his grip on his rifle. We keep low and quiet. No fighting unless we have to. But fate had other plans. A sudden crash echoed from the other side of the street. The group froze as a figure lunged from the shadows, a zombie, its face twisted in a grotesque mask of hunger. It snarled, stumbling toward them. Jack reacted instantly, swinging his wrench in a wide arc. The sickening crunch of bone echoed as the zombie collapsed. The others sprang into action, rifles firing in rapid succession, mowing down the creatures that had been drawn by the noise. It was over in moments, but the tension remained thick. They were close to the horde's center, and it was growing bolder. Maggie wiped sweat and grime from her brow. "This isn't just a random pack," she said, voice low. "They're organized, somehow." Caleb frowned. What could organize monsters like these? They pressed onward, eyes sharp and hearts pounding. As dusk approached, the team discovered a chilling clue, a ruined research facility, its gates torn open, papers scattered like ghosts in the wind. The building looked like it had once been a center for science or medicine, now abandoned, but not silent. Inside, they found more signs, vials shattered, computers smashed, and walls splattered with faded warnings. On a cracked terminal, Caleb managed to power up a flickering screen. The files that came to life told a story no one wanted to hear, an experiment gone wrong, a virus that had slipped containment, turning humans into these undead horrors. Worse, the virus had spread faster than anyone anticipated, turning entire cities into wastelands. "We're dealing with a nightmare made by humans," Sarah said bitterly. "And it's still out there." Before they could explore further, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. Outside, the unmistakable groans of the undead began to rise, a swelling tide of monsters moving toward the facility, drawn by the noise. "We need to move. Now," Thomas ordered. The team gathered what they could and sprinted back through the collapsing town, the horde in close pursuit. The forest that had once offered cover now seemed like a gauntlet. Branches snagged at their clothes, roots threatened to trip them, and all the while, the relentless moans grew louder behind them. At one point, Caleb stumbled, nearly falling, but Thomas caught him just in time. "Keep moving," Sarah urged, panic threading her voice. Finally, they burst out of the trees and onto the open fields leading back to New Liberty. But the sight that greeted them froze their blood. The town's fences were broken, wider gaps than before. Smoke rose from the edge, and shadows danced like specters in the fading light. The undead had come. Thomas's jaw clenched. "They've attacked while we were gone." Sarah's eyes burned with resolve. "We have to warn them. Prepare for the worst." Caleb pointed toward a faint glimmer of light from the town's center, the last beacon of hope in this desolate world. As the five ran toward New Liberty, the weight of their mission pressed down on them. They had glimpsed the true scope of the threat. This was no longer a fight for survival, it was a battle for the very soul of dead America's last safe zone. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, new dangers waited, more deadly, more cunning, and far from defeated. The heavy thud of their boots on the dirt road was drowned out only by the distant, chilling groans of the undead. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning wood, the unmistakable sign that New Liberty was under attack. The team's hearts pounded harder with every step as they drew closer to the last safe zone they'd fought so hard to protect. Thomas's gaze swept the horizon. The fences, once a proud symbol of their determination, lay shattered and twisted. Here and there, flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the crumbling barricades. The attack had been brutal, more coordinated than anyone expected. "Faster," Sarah urged, her voice barely concealing the panic rising within her. "If they breach the inner defenses, it's over." Maggie tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes scanning the smoke-choked outskirts. "I can already see figures moving through the haze. We're not going to get in quietly." Jack, ever the pragmatist, checked the wrench strapped to his back and shook his head. "This is worse than we thought. They must have waited for us to leave before coming. It's a trap." Caleb gritted his teeth. "We're the only ones who can stop this. The town's counting on us." When they reached the center of New Liberty, the scene was chaos incarnate. Townsfolk ran in every direction, trying to secure what they could. Mothers clutched children tightly, while the makeshift militia scrambled to man the broken defenses. Smoke billowed from several buildings, and the thick, acrid smell stung the eyes. "Thomas! Sarah!" a frantic voice called out. It was Eli, the town's blacksmith, rushing toward them with a group of armed men. "We've lost the east wall," he gasped, breath ragged. "They're pouring through the gap like a flood. We need every able body to hold them back." Thomas nodded sharply. "Sarah, Caleb, Jack, Maggie, form up. We're going to plug that breach. Everyone else, prepare for evacuation procedures." The team moved with practiced precision, adrenaline sharpening their focus. As they sprinted toward the eastern flank, the screams and growls of the undead echoed like a monstrous symphony. The ground trembled under the relentless surge of bodies. "Keep your heads down," Caleb barked. "Watch your angles." The first wave crashed against them like a tidal wave. Hands clawed and teeth snapped, but the defenders fought with a ferocity born from desperation. Maggie's shots rang out, picking off the closest attackers with deadly accuracy. Jack swung his wrench, crushing skulls with bone-shattering blows. Thomas and Caleb fought side by side, their rifles barking orders of death to the encroaching horde. But for every undead they felled, more kept coming. Sarah's sharp eyes caught a sudden movement, a hulking figure, larger and more savage than the others, leading the charge. Its eyes glowed faintly in the smoky twilight, and its guttural growl cut through the chaos like a battle cry. "That's no ordinary zombie," she whispered, heart hammering. "It's different." Thomas recognized it immediately. "The Alpha. We've heard stories, a mutated leader, smarter and faster. If it reaches the heart of the town, it's the end." The Alpha smashed through barricades with terrifying strength, tearing into the militia with brute force. Sarah gritted her teeth and took careful aim, firing shot after shot. The creature seemed relentless, shrugging off bullets that would have stopped others. "Focus fire," Thomas ordered. "Bring it down before it breaks through." The team and militia concentrated their attacks, but the Alpha only roared louder, rallying the horde around it. The tide of undead pushed forward, overwhelming the defenders inch by inch. Amidst the battle, a sharp cry rang out. "Help! Over here!" Sarah turned toward the sound and saw a group of civilians trapped behind a fallen wall, cornered by snarling zombies. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward them, signaling the others to cover her. "Stay close," she shouted, grabbing the hands of two terrified children. "We're getting out." Thomas and Caleb laid down suppressing fire, buying time for Sarah and the civilians to retreat. Jack and Maggie flanked the group, clearing a path as the undead closed in. They made it back to the inner compound, hearts pounding and lungs burning. The small group of survivors collapsed onto the dirt, shaking but alive. "Is everyone all right?" Sarah asked urgently. Nods and murmurs of relief answered her. Yet the victory felt hollow. The Alpha was still out there, and the breach was widening. "We can't hold much longer," Eli said grimly as he checked the damage to their weapons. "If that thing gets inside, it's all over." Thomas wiped grime from his face, his mind racing. "We need a new plan, and fast." Just then, Caleb's eyes caught sight of something unusual near the horizon, a flicker of light, moving fast through the smoke. "Look," he shouted. "Reinforcements." The group turned toward the glow, hope sparking like a flame. A convoy of armored vehicles, their headlights piercing the dusk, rumbled over the hill. From them emerged figures clad in makeshift armor, weapons gleaming, faces determined. The Riders of Dead America, a rogue militia known for swift, brutal strikes against the undead, had come. Thomas stepped forward, heart pounding. "We're saved." But as the riders joined the fight, a deeper realization set in: this was only the beginning. The undead were evolving, growing stronger. New Liberty's survival depended not just on bravery, but on understanding the enemy and uniting every last fighter they could find. Sarah caught Thomas's eye. "From farmers to fighters, we've come this far. Now, we fight to keep this last safe zone alive. The battle raged into the night, every moment filled with suspense and danger. Each victory was hard-won, every loss felt like a personal blow. And through it all, one truth was clear: the fight for dead America was far from over. The riders' arrival was both a blessing and a warning. Their vehicles tore through the undead masses like wildfire, and their fierce, battle-hardened warriors brought a much-needed surge of hope. Yet, their presence also meant one undeniable truth: the danger was far greater and more organized than New Liberty's residents had ever imagined. Thomas rode beside Sarah and Caleb on one of the armored trucks, eyes scanning the battlefield. The sound of gunfire mixed with the guttural growls and shouts echoed endlessly. "We need to seal the breach completely," Thomas said, voice low but urgent. "And figure out how the undead are moving so fast and coordinating their attacks." One of the riders, a tall woman named Rhea with battle scars crisscrossing her face, nodded grimly. "We've been tracking those freaks for weeks. The Alpha's not just a monster, it's a leader, using the dead like soldiers." Sarah swallowed hard. "Like an army?" "Exactly," Rhea replied. "We're gonna need more than rifles and courage if we want to keep this place safe." As the convoy rolled forward, new defenders jumped into action, barricading gaps and setting traps. Flames flared from homemade Molotov cocktails, and sharpened spears thrust into the advancing zombies. Maggie took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I never thought I'd be fighting alongside mercenaries in armored trucks," she muttered to Jack. Jack shrugged, tightening his grip on his wrench. "Never thought I'd see the day when a farmer's life became a battlefield. Guess we're all fighters now." The clash between humans and undead grew more desperate by the minute. Bodies fell, both living and dead, creating a grim and chaotic tableau of survival. Suddenly, a deafening roar shook the air. The Alpha was not done. With savage fury, it charged toward the heart of New Liberty, breaking through one of the reinforced barricades as if it were paper. "Alpha's coming this way!" Caleb shouted, raising his rifle. Thomas, Sarah, and Rhea took position, preparing for the showdown. The Alpha's eyes glowed brighter now, and its snarls turned into terrifying war cries that seemed to rally the horde behind it. "This ends here," Thomas muttered, heart pounding. The fight was brutal. The Alpha was faster, smarter, and stronger than any zombie they'd faced. It dodged bullets and swatted away attacks like they were mere irritations. Sarah took a risky move, climbing atop a broken wall and aiming her rifle directly at the creature's glowing eyes. Her shot rang true, but the Alpha barely faltered. Rhea charged with her massive battle axe, swinging with all her might. The axe embedded deeply into the creature's side, drawing a terrible roar of pain and fury. But the Alpha responded by grabbing her, shaking her like a rag doll. Rhea's battle cry echoed before she hit the ground hard. "Rhea!" Thomas shouted, rushing to her side while the Alpha turned its attention to the next target, Maggie. Maggie ducked just in time, the Alpha's claws shredding the air where she'd been seconds before. "We have to take it down now," she yelled. Jack and Caleb flanked the beast, throwing everything they had at it. Caleb fired his rifle, aiming for the exposed wounds, while Jack smashed its legs with the wrench. The Alpha stumbled, wounded but far from defeated. "Keep pushing," Thomas urged, rallying the defenders around him. "We fight for every inch." Then, amid the chaos, a sudden explosion rocked the battlefield. One of the makeshift bomb traps ignited near the Alpha, engulfing it in flames. The creature howled, thrashing wildly, but the fire weakened it, finally forcing it to collapse. For a moment, silence fell. Then the horde faltered, leaderless and confused. The townsfolk and riders pressed their advantage, pushing the undead back into the shadows. The victory was hard-won, but it came with a price. Rhea lay battered but alive, the fire still smoldering on her armor. Thomas and Sarah helped her to her feet. "We held them off," Thomas said, voice hoarse but determined. "But for how long?" Sarah asked quietly. Eli approached, grim-faced. "This wasn't a random attack. Someone, or something, is directing the undead. We're not just fighting monsters, We're fighting a force that knows what it's doing. Jack clenched his fists. Then we find out who, and we stop them. No more running. No more waiting for the next wave. The team gathered inside the town hall to regroup. Maps and radios cluttered the tables, and the flickering candlelight cast long shadows across determined faces. We need intel, Rhea said. If we're going to survive, we have to understand the enemy's strategy. Sarah nodded. I'll lead a scouting party. We'll find out what's driving this horde. Thomas studied the maps carefully, his mind racing with possibilities. And I'll organize the defenses. We'll set traps, reinforce walls, whatever it takes. Caleb spoke up. I want to train more people. We need every able body ready for the next fight. Maggie smiled faintly. From farmers to fighters. We're all in this together. As the night deepened, the small group of survivors prepared for what was to come. The battle for New Liberty was far from over, and the dead were only getting smarter. But beneath the fear and exhaustion was something stronger, a fierce determination to protect their home, their families, and their future. In this last safe zone of dead America, ordinary people were becoming legends. And the fight was just beginning. Would you like me to continue with Part 5? The story will keep building tension and uncover new mysteries. The dawn was reluctant to rise over New Liberty, as if even the sun feared what the day might bring. A thick haze hung low across the fields and the shattered town, muffling the sounds of early morning preparations. Inside the town hall, the leaders, Thomas, Sarah, Caleb, Maggie, and Rhea, huddled around the battered map, whispering urgently. The scouting party leaves at first light, Sarah said, her eyes burning with determination. We'll find the source of the attacks, whatever or whoever is controlling the horde. Thomas nodded, his jaw tight. This can't go on. The Alpha's just the beginning. If the undead are evolving, then so must we. Caleb leaned over the map, pointing toward a thick patch of forest about 5 miles from the town. There's a communication tower out there. We've never been able to reach it. It could be a relay point or something, maybe the source of this control. Rhea, rubbing her sore arm where the Alpha had nearly crushed her, added quietly, or a trap. Whatever it is, it's why the attacks have become so organized. Outside, the town was a frenzy of activity. Men and women who had once tended fields and raised livestock now hammered wood, sharpened weapons, and reinforced fences. Children huddled in doorways, their wide eyes reflecting fear but also hope. Maggie moved through the crowd, offering quiet words of encouragement. She stopped beside a young farmer named Eli, who was struggling to set up a barricade. Don't let the fear win, she said softly. We've come too far to lose now. Eli nodded, squaring his shoulders. I'm ready. Whatever comes. As the sun peeked over the horizon, Sarah's scouting party, herself, Caleb, and 2 riders, mounted up and prepared to leave. Thomas clasped Sarah's shoulder. Be careful. We're counting on you. Sarah smiled grimly. We'll bring answers back. And if we find danger, we'll be ready. The group rode out through the cracked gates, the fields stretching endlessly before them. The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. As they approached the trees, Sarah slowed the horses. Stay alert. If there's something controlling the undead, it could be hidden here. The group dismounted and moved cautiously among the towering pines. Their boots crunched on fallen leaves and broken branches. Every shadow seemed to shift and move, every rustle a threat. Then, just as they reached the clearing where the communication tower stood, an eerie stillness settled over the group. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. Look at this. The tower was ancient and rusted, but what caught their attention was the ground around it, scattered with strange devices, broken antennas, and piles of shredded wires. It's been tampered with recently, said one rider, examining the debris. Someone's been here. Someone controlling this. Sarah scanned the tree line. No sign of undead yet. But we're not alone. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air, mechanical and unnatural. From the shadows, a group of survivors emerged, faces grim and armed with makeshift weapons. "We mean no harm," Sarah called out, raising her hands. The strangers hesitated, then one stepped forward. A woman with piercing eyes and a scar tracing her cheek. "We're the Watchers. We've been trying to stop the spread from the inside. But it's getting worse." Sarah exchanged a look with Caleb. "You know what's controlling the horde?" The woman nodded. "Some kind of device buried beneath the tower. A signal amplifier. It's driving the zombies, giving them strength and coordination." Caleb clenched his fists. "So it's technology controlling the dead. Not nature." The Watcher's leader sighed. "Exactly. And if that device isn't destroyed, New Liberty won't stand a chance." Sarah's mind raced. "We need a plan. Can you help us get inside and shut it down?" The woman hesitated. "It's heavily guarded. By more than just zombies." "Then we'll fight," Sarah said firmly. Together. Back in New Liberty, the defenders prepared for the next wave. The news from the scouting party brought a mix of hope and dread. If the signal was the root cause, cutting it off might turn the tide, but it wouldn't be easy. Thomas gathered the town's militia. "We're going on the offensive," he announced. "We take the fight to the source. We're not waiting for the dead to come to us." Jack spoke up, voice steady despite the tension. "We've trained hard. We're ready." Maggie looked around at the weary but determined faces. "From farmers to fighters," she repeated softly, "and now, warriors." That night, as the town fell into a restless sleep, Sarah and her team prepared their assault on the tower. The forest was alive with unseen dangers. Shadows moved like whispers, and every step felt like walking on a knife's edge. When they reached the tower's base, they discovered something chilling: mechanical sentries, half dead but fused with metal and wires, patrolling the perimeter with slow, unnatural precision. Rhea whispered, "They're not just zombies anymore. They're weapons." The team crept closer, hearts pounding. The hum of the device grew louder. Suddenly, a screech shattered the silence. The sentries activated, their eyes glowing red. "Fight!" Sarah yelled. Gunfire and metal clashed in a desperate struggle. The team fought with everything they had, using every skill learned in the harsh days of survival. Caleb smashed one sentry with his rifle butt, while Sarah took down another with precise shots. But the device pulsed stronger with every moment of combat. Finally, Sarah reached the tower's control panel. With trembling hands, she ripped open the casing and found the core, a pulsating orb of energy sending waves of control through the forest. "We have to destroy it," she yelled over the chaos. Jack's voice crackled over the radio. "Get ready for extraction." Sarah planted explosives around the core, heart racing as the sentries closed in. "Time's running out," Caleb warned. With a final, determined glance at the device, Sarah detonated the charges. The blast rocked the forest, sending a shockwave of light and sound. The mechanical sentries collapsed, their glowing eyes extinguished. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell. The horde outside faltered, their movements slow and confused. Sarah exhaled deeply. "It's over." But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of a new battle, one where technology and humanity would clash in a fight for survival. Would you like me to continue with part 6? The forest seemed to hold its breath after the explosion. The once terrifying mechanical sentries lay motionless, strewn like broken relics across the ground. The pulsating hum that had controlled the undead was silenced, but the danger hadn't disappeared. Sarah and her team stood amidst the rubble, adrenaline still coursing through their veins as the realization settled: they had struck a critical blow. "We did it," Caleb whispered, scanning the treeline. "At least, for now." But the Watcher's leader, her eyes sharp despite exhaustion, shook her head. "The signal is down. The horde will lose its coordination. But they won't just disappear. They'll keep coming. Wild, uncontrolled, and more desperate." Sarah looked toward the horizon where the sun had risen fully now, bathing the world in a harsh light. Then we better get moving. We can't waste this chance. Back in New Liberty, the atmosphere was electric. Word of the scouting party's success spread quickly. The townsfolk, long bruised by endless attacks, found a spark of renewed hope. Thomas addressed the gathered defenders. The enemy is weaker now, confused without their leader and the signal. We hold the line. We fight back harder. This is our moment. Maggie, standing beside him, nodded. From farmers, we've become fighters. Today, we become warriors. As the defenders fortified their positions, Sarah and the scouting party returned, weary but triumphant. They were met with cheers and relieved embraces, but the joy was tempered by the knowledge that the battle wasn't over. Thomas pulled Sarah aside. What's next? We've cut the signal, but they're still coming. Sarah's voice was steady, but inside, a storm raged. We need to prepare for a siege. Without the signal, the undead will become unpredictable. They'll swarm, attack with no coordination, and they'll be desperate and relentless. Caleb added, we have to think smarter. Traps, patrols, early warnings. We can't just wait for them to come to us. That evening, the town gathered around fires to share plans and stories. The unity that had grown from desperation now burned bright. Old farmers shared their knowledge of the land, and former hunters taught marksmanship and stealth. The community became a battalion forged by shared fear and fierce determination. Jack, polishing his wrench into a makeshift weapon, spoke to a group of younger fighters. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about reclaiming what's ours. As darkness fell, the first signs of the Horde's chaotic advance became clear. Without the Alpha's command, the zombies surged like a flood, directionless but terrifyingly numerous. The night exploded into violence. The dead came from every direction, crashing against barricades, biting through wooden gates, and forcing the defenders into brutal, close-quarters combat. Thomas moved like a man possessed, rallying fighters and patching defenses. His voice cut through the chaos, hold the line. Don't let them break through. Maggie fought beside him, her farmer's hands now skilled in swinging a heavy axe. She knocked down 2 undead before grabbing a fallen teammate and dragging him to safety. Sarah and Caleb coordinated patrols along the perimeter, communicating through hand signals and shouted commands. Every movement was calculated, every bullet counted. The town's traps, pits covered with brush, tripwires rigged to sharpen stakes, and flaming barricades, took their toll on the attackers. But the undead were relentless, battering the defenses until wood splintered and steel bent. At one point, a massive surge broke through a weak point near the granary. A horde flooded inside, forcing the defenders into a desperate fight to reclaim their ground. Jack rallied a small group, clearing the building room by room. The smell of decay was overpowering as they battled through the dark, narrow spaces. We can't lose the granary, Jack said, voice tense. Without food, New Liberty won't last. With grim determination, they pushed the undead back, reclaiming the granary at great cost. As dawn approached, the fighting slowed. The surviving undead retreated, confused and scattered without their leader's guidance. Exhausted and bloodied, the defenders counted their losses and tended to their wounded. The battle had been fierce, but they had held. Thomas gathered the leaders. We bought ourselves time. But this isn't a final victory. The dead will keep coming, maybe stronger, maybe smarter. Sarah nodded. We need to find out if there's more than one signal, or if someone else is behind this. Rhea, now fully recovered, tightened her grip on her axe. We keep fighting. We adapt. We survive. Outside the walls, the forest stood silent once again, but shadows shifted beneath the trees. Somewhere in the distance, new threats were stirring. And the unlikely heroes of New Liberty, farmers turned fighters, knew their journey was far from over. The future was uncertain, but their resolve was clear. They would fight. They would protect. And they would rise. Would you like me to continue with Part 7? The story will deepen with new challenges and surprising twists. The calm after the battle was deceptive. The survivors of New Liberty knew all too well that silence often meant something worse was coming. For days, the town held its breath, repairing walls, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next assault. But the dead did not return in waves as before. Instead, an uneasy quiet settled over the fields and the shattered streets. Sarah and Caleb spent long hours poring over their maps and notes from the scouting mission. The Watcher's leader had been invaluable, sharing knowledge about the technology behind the signal amplifier and what might be done to stop it permanently. Yet, despite their efforts, something nagged at Sarah's instincts. The technology seemed too advanced, too deliberate for mere chance or random survivors. Thomas, too, had noticed the change. In his nightly meetings with the militia, he voiced the growing suspicion: this isn't just a virus or a random outbreak. Someone is controlling this chaos. Someone who wants this to happen. The word enemy hung heavy in the air. Maggie, ever the voice of reason, argued, if there's a mastermind, we have to find them before they find us. We can't just wait for the next attack. Rhea, whose wound had healed but whose eyes still held the shadow of that near-death encounter with the Alpha, added, then we need to send out a new scouting team. To go further. To find answers. The decision was unanimous. A small group would set out, armed with weapons, traps, and hope, but also with the heavy weight of uncertainty. The night before their departure, the town gathered for a rare moment of calm. Fires crackled in the square, and the faces of the defenders glowed orange and gold in the flickering light. Stories were shared, laughter was tentative but genuine, and for a few hours, the fear was pushed back. Sarah sat with Caleb, watching the flames dance. We've come so far, Caleb said softly. From plowing fields to fighting wars. Sarah nodded. But the war is just beginning. Whoever is behind this, we need to be ready. The next morning, as the sun rose over New Liberty, the scouting party slipped quietly through the eastern gate. Their goal was a rumored facility, a hidden research complex abandoned during the chaos, that might hold clues to the origin of the signal amplifier. The journey was grueling. The forest grew thicker and darker, the silence punctuated by distant groans and rustling. The group moved cautiously, every step measured, every shadow a potential threat. Suddenly, a sharp cry shattered the quiet. One of the riders, a young man named Eli, collapsed, clutching his leg. Trap! Sarah shouted. They scrambled back as a hidden net dropped from the trees, entangling Eli and pinning him to the ground. From the shadows, hostile survivors emerged, armed, fierce, and unwilling to negotiate. The skirmish was brutal but brief. The newcomers fought not like undead, but like desperate, well-organized humans. They wore scavenged military gear and carried weapons scavenged from forgotten battlefields. Sarah realized with a shock, they were not alone in this world. There were others, survivors who had chosen a darker path. After the fight, the leader of the hostile group stepped forward. A man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. You don't belong here, he said. This land is ours now. Sarah's voice was steady. New Liberty is a safe zone. We're here to survive. Not to fight each other. The man laughed. Survival means power. And we intend to take it all. Tension hung thick in the air, but neither side wanted another fight, not yet. The hostile group retreated into the shadows, leaving the scouting party shaken but determined. Not just the dead we have to worry about, Caleb muttered. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle. We'll need to be ready for both. The scouting party pushed onward, eventually finding the facility, a sprawling complex hidden beneath overgrown vines and rusted metal. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. Flickering lights cast eerie shadows as they explored sterile halls and broken labs. In one room, they discovered detailed files and blueprints, evidence that the signal amplifier was part of a larger experiment. A secret project gone horribly wrong, designed to control the undead as weapons. A cold realization settled over Sarah. This wasn't an accident, she said. Someone planned this. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the hallway, footsteps, heavy and purposeful. The team braced for an attack, weapons raised. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a scientist, gaunt and desperate. He pleaded, "You don't understand. The signal was meant to control the outbreak, to end the chaos. But it went wrong." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?" He hesitated. "There's more out there, groups like ours, trying to fix the damage, but some want to use it to control what's left of the world." The truth hit hard. The fight was not just for survival. It was a battle for the future, and every choice would shape what came next. As the scouting party prepared to leave, the weight of their discovery settled on them. They were no longer just fighting zombies, they were fighting an enemy that thrived on control, chaos, and power. Back in New Liberty, the defenders steeled themselves for the trials ahead. They had faced the dead, the machines, and now, the darkness within humanity itself. The farmers had become fighters. The fighters would become heroes. And the last safe zone in dead America would hold, no matter the cost. Would you like me to continue with Part 8? The story is about to reveal more secrets and face even greater dangers. The return to New Liberty was heavy with silence. The scouting party moved through the gate, weary and burdened by the weight of the secrets they carried. The facility's evidence had changed everything. The outbreak, the signal, the watchers, it wasn't random. It was engineered. Thomas met them at the gate, his eyes dark with worry. "Tell me everything." Sarah laid out the truth, the secret experiments, the failed attempts to control the undead, and the revelation that others were involved, some with darker intentions. "This changes our fight," Thomas said, pacing. "It's not just about survival anymore. It's about stopping those who want to weaponize this apocalypse." Maggie stepped forward, determination burning in her gaze. "We need to find allies, gather intelligence. If these groups exist, we can't let them grow unchecked." Caleb nodded. "And we need to strengthen our defenses. More traps, patrols, and training. We have to be ready for anything." The town mobilized quickly. Men and women who had once farmed the land now drilled with rifles, built barricades, and studied maps. Even the children learned to recognize danger and stay hidden. Meanwhile, Sarah and her closest team prepared for another mission, to track down these other groups and find out who was truly behind the signal and the outbreak. Before leaving, Sarah met privately with Rhea. "You're ready," Sarah said, clasping her friend's shoulder. "This mission will be dangerous, but it's the key to our survival." Rhea's expression was fierce. "I won't let us fail." As the team ventured beyond the borders of New Liberty once more, the world felt colder, emptier. The forests seemed to close in, hiding threats unseen. Their journey took them through abandoned towns and silent highways. They encountered remnants of civilization, burnt-out cars, empty homes, signs of people who had fled or fallen. One evening, as they camped near a broken radio tower, the faint crackle of static burst through the night air. A voice, distorted but unmistakable. "New Liberty, we see you. The signal can be restored. Join us, or be destroyed." The message sent a chill through the group. "They know we're here," Caleb whispered. Sarah's jaw tightened. "They're watching, testing us. We have to find their base before they strike again." Over the following days, the group followed faint clues, signs of recent activity, discarded supplies, and coded messages left by other survivors. Eventually, they reached a heavily fortified compound hidden deep in the mountains. Guard towers, barbed wire, and armed sentries marked it as a fortress. Sarah studied the compound from a ridge. "This is it," she said. "The source of the signal, or close to it." They spent days observing patterns, patrols, shifts, and weaknesses in the defenses. The hostile group they had encountered earlier was part of this network, trained and well-armed. One night, under a new moon, Sarah's team moved in. They slipped past guards, disabling alarms and traps with precision. Inside the compound, the air buzzed with electricity and danger. In a central control room, they found the heart of the operation, a massive console linked to the signal amplifier and banks of computers monitoring undead movements. Suddenly, alarms blared. Their presence had been detected. A fierce battle erupted. Shots echoed through the halls as defenders poured in. The team fought with every ounce of skill they had, dodging, shooting, and retreating when necessary. Sarah moved toward the console, determined to shut down the signal for good. Caleb and Rhea covered her back, holding off attackers. With shaking hands, Sarah began the shutdown process. The screen flickered, lights dimmed, and then the humming ceased. Outside, the horde's movement faltered, the undead slowed, disorganized once more. The team made their escape as the compound descended into chaos. Back in the forest, they paused to catch their breath. "We did it," Caleb said, exhaustion and relief mingling in his voice. But Sarah's gaze was distant. "For now. But there are still others out there. More dangerous. We have to keep fighting." As dawn broke over New Liberty, the town's defenders prepared for what lay ahead, a future uncertain, filled with enemies both living and undead. But united by courage, by hope, and by the strength of their unlikely bond, they would face whatever came next. The farmers had truly become fighters. And fighters, the last hope for dead America's last safe zone. Ready for Part 9? The tension will rise as new alliances form and hidden threats emerge. Back in New Liberty, the air buzzed with a mix of relief and urgency. The signal amplifier was silent, and the undead horde's unnatural coordination had faltered, at least for now. But the victory had come at a cost, and the townspeople knew better than to let their guard down. Thomas gathered the council in the town hall, a once simple barn now fortified with scrap metal and sandbags. Around the rough-hewn table sat the key leaders, Sarah, Caleb, Maggie, Rhea, and others who had earned the community's trust through grit and sacrifice. "We struck a blow," Thomas began, voice steady but firm. "But this war is far from over. The compound we destroyed was one link in a chain. Others still exist." Maggie leaned forward. "Our scouts reported increased movement to the west. New groups forming, some more ruthless than the last." Sarah's mind raced. "The hostile survivors we met before, they're not just scavengers. They have resources, weapons, and worse, they seem organized. This isn't random chaos. It's a calculated campaign." Caleb rubbed his chin. "We need more intelligence. We can't fight what we don't understand." The council agreed to send out multiple scouting teams, but also to prepare the town for possible assaults. New barricades went up, watchtowers were repaired, and every able-bodied person was trained in defense. Amid this activity, Sarah noticed a change in Rhea. Once quiet and cautious, Rhea had become fierce and determined, almost unrecognizable. One evening, as they cleaned weapons in the workshop, Sarah asked gently, "You okay?" Rhea looked up, her eyes fierce but shadowed. "I'm ready. Ready to do whatever it takes to protect this place. To protect you all." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight they all carried. Days passed with little incident. The town's routine settled into a tense rhythm of work, watch, and rest. But then, a new threat arrived, not undead, not hostile survivors, but a lone messenger. The stranger came at dusk, riding a battered motorcycle covered in dust and grime. He wore a leather jacket adorned with patches from places Sarah had never heard of, and his eyes held a hardened edge. At the gate, Thomas confronted him. "State your business." The rider removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by years of hardship and scars. "Name's Jax. I come with a message, and a warning." Inside the council hall, Jax laid out his story. He was part of a network of survivor groups spread across the region, united by a loose alliance against the growing threat of the Syndicate, a shadowy organization behind the signal amplifiers and the aggressive survivor militias. "They want to control the last safe zones," Jax explained. "They're building an army, both living and dead. If we don't stop them, they'll crush every free community." Sarah exchanged looks with Thomas and Maggie. The Syndicate was a name whispered in rumors, but now it was real, and it was coming. "We need to join forces," Jax urged. "Share resources, intelligence, and fight together." The council debated the risks. Trust was fragile, and the town's defenses were still fragile. But the threat was greater than any one group could face alone. In the end, they agreed to send envoys to meet with other survivor camps and form a coalition. Meanwhile, Sarah worked closely with Jax, mapping out syndicate movements and planning sabotage missions. Caleb and Rhea trained new recruits, preparing them for guerrilla tactics and urban combat. One night, Sarah and Jax slipped out on a reconnaissance mission to intercept syndicate supply lines. They moved under the cover of darkness, using shadows and silence as their allies. The air was thick with tension, every snap of a twig could mean discovery. At a narrow pass, they spotted a convoy, trucks loaded with supplies, guarded by armed men. Sarah signaled, and they set traps along the route, then retreated to watch. The convoy hit the traps, makeshift barriers, tripwires, and smoke bombs that threw the drivers into confusion. Chaos erupted. Sarah and Jax attacked with precision, taking out guards and disabling vehicles. But just as victory seemed within reach, a loud roar echoed behind them. The undead, drawn by the noise, surged forward. The battle became a desperate fight on two fronts, against syndicate soldiers and the relentless dead. Sarah fired steadily, pushing back attackers while shouting for Jax to fall back. Amid the melee, she spotted a figure, a syndicate lieutenant, directing reinforcements. Taking aim, Sarah fired, the man falling with a grunt. The convoy shattered, the survivors scattered, and the undead overwhelmed the remaining soldiers. Sarah and Jax retreated through the forest, hearts pounding, lungs burning. "We sent a message," Jax said, panting. "They'll retaliate." Back in New Liberty, the victory was celebrated but overshadowed by the knowledge that the syndicate's grip was tightening. Sarah stood on the town's watchtower, staring out at the dark horizon. The war had changed, from survival against the undead to a fight for freedom against human ambition and cruelty. "We have to be ready," she whispered. "Because the real battle is just beginning." Want me to continue with part 10? There's more danger, unexpected alliances, and shocking revelations ahead. The quiet before dawn was deceptive. New Liberty's inhabitants stirred with a nervous energy that never quite faded since the arrival of the syndicate threat. Every shadow seemed heavier, every sound sharper. The victory against the convoy had bought them time, but that time was running out. Sarah met with Thomas and the council in the dim light of the war room, a converted cellar beneath the main barn. Maps, radios, and hastily drawn plans cluttered the table. "We can't wait for the syndicate to come to us," Sarah said, tracing a finger along the routes their scouts had mapped. "We need to strike first, disrupt their operations before they grow stronger." Thomas looked grim. "A direct assault on their main base is suicide. We don't have the manpower or firepower." "That's why we need allies," Maggie said firmly. "Jax's network can give us support, but we need to convince more survivor groups to join." Rhea, standing near the back, nodded in agreement. "We've been training new recruits. They're ready to fight, and to protect what's left of this world." Caleb stepped forward, his voice steady. "We need diversion tactics, hit their supply lines, sabotage communications, and keep them off balance." Sarah's mind raced. The syndicate was ruthless and well-equipped. They had advanced weapons, vehicles, and possibly even sleeper agents within survivor camps. "We need intelligence," she said. "If we can infiltrate their ranks, learn their plans from the inside, we can anticipate their moves." Jax volunteered immediately. "I've got contacts who can get us in, but it's dangerous." The council agreed to prepare a covert mission. Sarah chose a small team, herself, Jax, Rhea, and Caleb. As the team prepared to leave, the town held a quiet ceremony, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Farmers who once plowed fields now held rifles and survival gear, standing ready to defend their home. The night of the mission arrived. Under cover of darkness, the team slipped away, navigating through the dense forest toward the syndicate's outpost, a fortified encampment hidden in a valley, shielded by steep cliffs and watchful sentries. Using forged documents and disguises provided by Jax's contacts, they posed as mercenaries seeking work. Inside the camp, the atmosphere was cold and tense, a mix of fear and brutal discipline. Sarah observed everything: the soldiers' routines, the guard rotations, the weapons depot, and the guarded command tent where the syndicate's leaders met. Days passed with painstaking caution. The team sent back intermittent reports through hidden radios, relaying critical intelligence to New Liberty. One evening, Sarah overheard a conversation between two officers discussing an impending assault on multiple survivor camps, including New Liberty. "They'll hit us hard and fast," one said. "The signal amplifiers will coordinate the horde's attack while our forces take the towns." Sarah's heart pounded. The syndicate's plan was clear: an overwhelming strike to crush all resistance in one brutal sweep. She shared the news with her team. "We have to warn New Liberty and prepare for battle. This is no longer just defense, it's survival." The team began sabotaging communications and weapons caches, quietly crippling the syndicate's ability to coordinate. But betrayal struck when one of the mercenaries they trusted turned on them. An alarm blared through the camp. Chaos erupted as syndicate soldiers swarmed the quarters. Sarah and her team fought fiercely, slipping through narrow corridors and back exits to escape. Outside, Caleb covered their retreat with precise shots, while Rhea guided them through the dense forest. Though wounded and exhausted, the team reached New Liberty with vital information. The town's defenses shifted overnight. Traps were reinforced, patrols doubled, and every person prepared for the coming storm. The council held a tense meeting. "We'll need every hand on deck," Thomas declared. "This is the fight of our lives." As dawn broke, the distant rumble began. The first wave of undead stirred, drawn by the syndicate's signal. New Liberty braced itself, a community transformed by hardship into warriors united by hope and determination. The battle for Dead America's last safe zone was about to reach its fiercest chapter yet. Would you like me to continue with Part 11? The tension is building toward a massive showdown. The first light of dawn barely touched the horizon when the alarm bells shattered the silence across New Liberty. Sarah stood on the watchtower, heart pounding as she saw the creeping swarm of the undead approach, but this time, they weren't alone. Behind the horde, a line of black-clad syndicate soldiers advanced with calculated precision, weapons raised, ready to crush the town's defenders. The syndicate's assault had begun. Thomas barked orders as townsfolk scrambled to their stations. Barricades creaked under hurried reinforcements, while lookouts shouted warnings and relayed information with grim urgency. Caleb and Rhea led squads of new recruits, their rifles steady despite shaking hands. The farmers-turned-fighters fought with desperate courage, every shot a statement: they would not surrender. Sarah moved through the chaos, coordinating defenses, urging her people to hold the line. The undead surged forward, driven by the amplifier's pulse, relentless and terrifying. Suddenly, the syndicate soldiers opened fire, cutting through the defenders with ruthless efficiency. Explosions rocked the outskirts, sending plumes of smoke into the sky. Sarah ducked behind a ruined vehicle, firing back with precision. Around her, allies fell, but the fighting spirit burned brighter than ever. Jax fought alongside her, his eyes scanning for weaknesses. "They've brought heavy weapons, rockets and machine guns. We have to take out their command post or this place will fall." Sarah nodded. "Rhea, Caleb, lead a team to flank them from the east. Maggie, get the medics ready. We can't afford to lose more people." The battle became a brutal dance of survival. The undead clawed at barricades while syndicate soldiers pushed forward, their disciplined advance cutting through resistance. Amid the noise, Sarah spotted a group of civilians trapped in a burning building. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward them, dodging gunfire and falling debris. She reached the building's entrance, smoke stinging her eyes. Calling out, she found 3 frightened faces huddled together. "Stay close," Sarah urged, guiding them through the thick haze and back toward safety. Meanwhile, Caleb's flanking maneuver proved successful. His team caught the syndicate soldiers off guard, dismantling heavy weapons and cutting supply lines. But the cost was high. Caleb was injured, a deep gash across his arm. Rhea tended to him quickly, their bond forged in fire. Back at the center, Sarah rallied the defenders for a final push. We fight for every inch of this land. For our families. For our future. Her voice echoed over the gunfire as the community surged forward, driving back both the living and the dead. Hours passed like an eternity. Bodies littered the ground, the smell of smoke and sweat thick in the air. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, a deafening explosion rocked the Syndicate's command post. The signal amplifiers shattered, sending a wave of confusion through the enemy ranks. Without their control, the undead horde faltered, some retreating aimlessly. Syndicate soldiers, now leaderless, began to falter. Seizing the moment, New Liberty's defenders pressed their advantage, pushing the attackers back beyond the outer defenses. As silence fell, broken only by distant groans and the crackling of fires, Sarah looked over the battlefield. The cost was staggering, but they had survived. Thomas approached, face drawn but proud. We held. Thanks to all of you. Jax wiped sweat from his brow. This is just the beginning. The Syndicate will regroup. We need to be ready. Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. The war for dead America's last safe zone was far from over, but so long as the farmers-turned-fighters stood together, hope endured. Want to keep going with Part 12? The story is heating up. The victory at New Liberty came at a high price. The wounded were tended to, the dead mourned, and the survivors dug deep to repair the shattered defenses. But even in moments of quiet, the looming threat of the Syndicate hung like a storm cloud. Sarah stood atop the rebuilt watchtower, staring at the horizon where the sun rose blood-red behind distant mountains. The battle had revealed their weaknesses, and their strengths. New Liberty was a beacon of hope, but it was also a target. Inside the barn-turned headquarters, the council gathered once again. Plans were drawn and redrawn, each map marked with new enemy movements and survivor alliances. Maggie tapped her finger on the map. We've heard rumors from the east, other survivor camps are organizing. Some want to join us, but others are too scared or too divided. Jax frowned. The Syndicate is spreading their influence fast. We can't wait for everyone to agree. We have to act. Thomas nodded. We need a way to unite the scattered groups before the Syndicate crushes them one by one. Rhea, still recovering from her injuries, added, we have an advantage, our people trust each other. We built this from nothing. We can be the example they need. Sarah took a deep breath. We'll send envoys, trusted fighters who know the stakes. We'll offer protection, resources, and a shared cause. But we must move quickly. As the meeting dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with Caleb. He was pacing slowly, his arm bandaged but his spirit unbroken. We can't keep fighting like this, Caleb said quietly. Every battle weakens us. We need to find their core, where the Syndicate's real power lies, and cut it off. Sarah met his gaze. I agree. But getting close means risking everything. That night, Sarah lay awake, the weight of leadership pressing down on her. She thought about her family, the life she'd left behind, the friends who'd become family, and the future she wanted to build. The next morning, the envoys set out, each carrying messages of hope and warnings of the Syndicate's brutality. Some survivor camps welcomed them with cautious optimism, others met them with suspicion or outright hostility. One camp, led by a hardened former soldier named Marcus, challenged Sarah's envoys to prove their strength. You want us to trust you? Marcus demanded. Then show us you're more than farmers playing at war. The envoys agreed to a test, a joint patrol to clear nearby woods of roaming undead, proving their capability and commitment. Sarah watched the reports come in. The patrol was a success, with careful strategy and cooperation. Marcus sent word he was willing to discuss alliance terms. Meanwhile, Jax intercepted Syndicate communications hinting at a secret facility where they manufactured weapons and controlled their undead armies. This is it, Jax said, urgency sharp in his voice. If we take that out, we cripple them. Sarah's mind raced. A strike on the facility would be dangerous, but necessary. The council agreed to prepare a stealth mission to infiltrate and destroy it. As they planned, New Liberty's citizens prepared for the worst. Training intensified. Scouts were doubled. Every person, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, understood that survival meant standing together. Days passed with tense anticipation. The strike team, led by Sarah, trained relentlessly, learning to move silently, fight efficiently, and trust each other implicitly. On the eve of the mission, Sarah gathered the team around a small fire. "This will be the hardest thing we've done," she said. "But it's the key to breaking the syndicate's hold on this land. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for every survivor who dreams of a safe tomorrow." The team nodded, steeling themselves for the dangerous journey ahead. Under the cloak of darkness, they slipped away from New Liberty, moving toward the syndicate's secret stronghold deep in the mountains. The air grew colder, the forests denser, and every step closer felt heavier with the weight of what was at stake. Their success or failure here would shape the fate of dead America. Would you like me to continue with Part 13? The story is reaching a pivotal moment. The night air was thick and cold as Sarah and her strike team moved cautiously through the dense forest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, felt amplified in the silence, reminding them of the dangers lurking in the shadows. They had left New Liberty hours ago, driven by a single purpose: to infiltrate the syndicate's secret weapons facility and cripple their hold on dead America. The forest around them was both a shield and a trap, providing cover but also hiding threats, from lurking undead to syndicate patrols. Jax led the way, his eyes sharp and ears tuned to the slightest sound. "We're close," he whispered. "The facility is just beyond that ridge." Sarah nodded, adjusting her grip on her rifle. The others moved with practiced stealth, their breath steady despite the tension. As they crested the ridge, the facility came into view, a sprawling complex of concrete buildings surrounded by high fences and guarded watchtowers. Floodlights swept the perimeter in slow arcs, illuminating the stark gray structures. "Security looks tight," Caleb muttered. "We'll need to disable those lights and take out the sentries quietly." Rhea checked their gear one last time. "We've trained for this. Stay sharp, and watch each other's backs." The team split into two groups. Sarah, Jax, and Caleb moved toward the eastern fence where a service gate provided a less guarded entry point. Rhea and two others took positions near the power substation, tasked with cutting electricity to the entire compound. Creeping closer, Sarah's heart pounded. The lives of thousands depended on their success. Jax signaled, and Caleb slipped forward to take out the nearest guard with a silenced pistol. The guard collapsed silently, and they moved on. Inside the fence, the facility was a maze of corridors and storage rooms. The team navigated by the blueprints Jax had memorized, moving toward the main control center. Meanwhile, Rhea's team crept through shadows toward the substation. One by one, they disabled power lines, plunging the facility into darkness. The floodlights flickered off, and a wave of confusion rippled through the compound. Alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled to investigate the blackout. Sarah's team heard shouting in the distance. "We have to move faster," Sarah urged. They reached the control center, a fortified room filled with monitors and communication devices. Caleb worked quickly, planting explosives on the main control panels while Sarah covered the door. Suddenly, footsteps approached, syndicate soldiers drawn by the alarm. A fierce firefight erupted. Sarah ducked behind a console as bullets ricocheted around her. Jax fired precise shots, keeping the attackers at bay. The team's training and determination showed, despite being outnumbered, they held their ground. Caleb finished setting the charges. "Time to go," he shouted. They retreated through the labyrinthine corridors, bullets chasing them every step. At the fence, they found Rhea's team waiting, all accounted for but tense. "Let's move," Sarah commanded. Explosions rocked the facility behind them, shaking the ground. The destruction was spectacular, the syndicate's weapons cache, control systems, and undead command amplifiers obliterated. The team ran hard through the forest, adrenaline fueling their flight. Safe at New Liberty, they were hailed as heroes. But the victory was bittersweet. The syndicate's grip had weakened, but the fight was far from over. Sarah addressed the town. We struck a blow for all survivors. But this war will demand everything we have. We must stay united, vigilant, and ready. Thomas stepped forward, voice steady. New alliances are forming. Other camps see what we've done. Together, we can rebuild this country. The farmers-turned-fighters had proven their worth, not just in defense, but in offense. They were the last hope for a free dead America. Would you like me to continue with part 14? The climax is nearing. The dawn after the raid was eerily quiet. New Liberty, though battered and bruised, stood firm, its people shaken but alive. The fires from the destroyed syndicate facilities still smoldered miles away, a stark reminder of the fight yet to come. But the atmosphere was heavy with hope, as if the ground beneath them now carried the weight of a future reclaimed. Sarah walked through the town square, nodding silently to neighbors and friends who gave her tired, yet grateful smiles. Every face told a story of survival, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit that had brought them this far. Inside the rebuilt community hall, a gathering had been called. The survivors filled the room, farmers, fighters, medics, and children alike, all seeking answers and reassurance. Sarah stood before them, flanked by Thomas, Jax, Caleb, and Rhea. The council members exchanged determined glances. They had grown from scattered survivors into a formidable force. Sarah cleared her throat, her voice steady but filled with passion. Yesterday, we dealt a serious blow to the syndicate. Their weapons factory is no more, their command systems destroyed. But they will not surrender. They will retaliate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear was natural, but so was defiance. We have seen what happens when we unite, Sarah continued. Our strength lies not in weapons or numbers alone, but in our will to protect each other, to build something better. We are farmers, fighters, parents, neighbors, and now, defenders of dead America's last safe zone. Thomas stepped forward. We've sent envoys to other survivor camps, and some have responded. This is our chance to build a coalition, not just to fight, but to rebuild. To create a network where no one is alone against the darkness. A hand raised from the back, an elder named Harold, voice shaky but clear. What if the syndicate attacks New Liberty again? Are we prepared to defend it? Can we hold the line? Sarah met his gaze with unwavering resolve. We will hold. We have trained hard. We have fortified our defenses. But most importantly, we will fight together. Jax added, we've learned their tactics and weaknesses. Our recent victories have given us valuable intelligence. We will use it. Caleb, still nursing his wounds, spoke up quietly, tomorrow, we will send a team to scout syndicate movements. We need to know where they plan to strike next. Rhea, now fully recovered, addressed the room as well. And we'll continue training more fighters. Every person here can be a defender. We will teach, support, and protect one another. A sense of determination filled the air. The survivors were no longer victims, they were a community forged in fire. That evening, Sarah stood by the watchtower again, staring at the horizon where twilight bled into the darkening sky. Her mind raced with plans, worries, and hopes. Behind her, Thomas joined silently. You're carrying the weight of all this on your shoulders. She nodded. I have to. If I falter, they falter. We cannot afford to lose hope now. Thomas smiled faintly. You don't have to do it alone. We all carry this weight together. She turned to him, grateful for his steady presence. Thank you. As night deepened, the stars emerged, cold and distant, yet somehow reassuring. Suddenly, a faint glow flickered near the edge of the forest, a signal from the scouts. Sarah grabbed her radio. This is Sarah. Report. A familiar voice crackled through. Sarah, it's Marcus. We've spotted syndicate patrols moving toward the western ridge. They're gathering forces. It looks like an attack. Her heart clenched. The syndicate was coming, bigger and more dangerous than ever. Prepare the town, Sarah ordered. We fight not just for survival, but for everything we've built. The council sprang into action, mobilizing every able-bodied person, setting traps, reinforcing barriers, and readying weapons. As the town braced for the coming storm, Sarah's gaze hardened with resolve. From farmers to fighters, they had risen to defend their home, and they would face whatever came with courage and unity. No matter the darkness, the light of dead America's last safe zone would not be extinguished. Would you like me to deliver part 15, the thrilling conclusion? The first light of dawn barely touched the horizon when the Syndicate's horde appeared, a shadowy wave surging toward New Liberty's defenses. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat synchronized with the pounding of footsteps and distant roars. Sarah stood atop the watchtower, eyes scanning the advancing enemies. She could see the grim determination etched on her people's faces as they manned barricades and readied weapons. The farmers had become fighters, the fighters' guardians, all bound by a shared will to protect their home. Jax moved beside her, gripping his rifle tightly. "They're coming faster than we thought." Sarah nodded. "We've prepared for this. Stay sharp." The first clash erupted like a storm. The Syndicate's undead forces smashed against the fortified gates, battering with relentless fury. New Liberty's defenders fired volley after volley, each shot a statement of defiance. Sarah led a squad through a side entrance, launching a surprise counterattack that scattered the Syndicate's front line. Caleb fought fiercely, his strength undiminished despite his wounds, while Rhea provided crucial support, coordinating reinforcements with calm precision. The battle swayed back and forth, a grueling test of endurance and will. Yet amidst the chaos, moments of humanity shone through, a farmer saving a child trapped under rubble, a medic risking everything to pull a wounded comrade to safety. Sarah's mind raced with strategy, adapting to every move the Syndicate made. She spotted a breach forming near the storage barn, a weak spot the enemy exploited. "Fall back. Regroup at the barn," she shouted. The defenders retreated in disciplined formation, closing ranks. Then, a coordinated strike, the defenders poured everything into one final stand. The barn's entrance became a choke point, where the Syndicate's advance slowed, and their numbers dwindled. Hours passed in brutal combat. Exhaustion clawed at everyone, but the spirit of New Liberty would not break. Suddenly, from the eastern ridge, a series of explosions erupted, the delayed effect of traps and charges set earlier by the scouts. Syndicate supply lines and reinforcements were cut off, leaving the horde vulnerable. Seeing their chance, Sarah rallied her fighters for a decisive push. "Now! For New Liberty!" With fierce determination, they surged forward, driving the Syndicate back. The tide of battle turned irrevocably. By midday, the last of the Syndicate forces fell, leaving only silence in their wake. The survivors gathered, weary but victorious. They had defended their home, their families, and their future. Sarah lowered her rifle, her voice carrying through the crowd. "We fought with everything we had, not just weapons, but heart. This victory is proof that even in the darkest times, hope can light the way." Thomas stepped forward, eyes shining with pride. "We are no longer just survivors. We are the keepers of this land, the protectors of what remains of America." Around them, the people cheered, tears mixing with dirt and sweat, a celebration of life amidst devastation. That night, as stars blanketed the sky, Sarah stood once more on the watchtower. She thought of all they had lost, and all they had gained. New Liberty was more than a safe zone, it was a beacon, a testament to the courage of ordinary people who had risen to become heroes. Their fight was far from over. Dead America still held dangers and shadows. But together, they would face whatever came. Because in this last safe zone, the spirit of the farmers turned fighters would never die. Would you like me to help with anything else, maybe a summary, character profiles, or photo prompts for this story?